Hey everyone, and thanks for joining us for our semifinal prediction show. I'm your host, Lauren Khalil. If you like listening to us chat about CrossFit news and everything that's going on in the sport, make sure to like and subscribe to our channel. We're headed into week 2 of semifinals and continuing with our sports analyst predictions for who will punch their ticket to the games. Each analyst, they will pick their games ticket predictions for both the men and the women, each with a wild card athlete. And then throughout the month of semifinals, they will receive a point for every athlete that they get correct, and an additional point if they correctly predict their placing. Today we have Brian Friend and Patrick Clark. They're joining us to look at the Mid-Atlantic CrossFit Challenge picks. We don't have Tommy Marquez today, but for the sake of the game, we do have his picks available. Today we're going to start on the women's side. 1 through 4 with PC and Brian are identical, with Brooke Wells in second for both. Brian, we'll start with you. What makes you so confident that she will do so well coming back from last year's injury?
Yeah, I mean, when that happened at the games last year, everyone's biggest concern is like, well, what's the time frame for a realistic return to competition going to be like for her? And you know, the Open's only 6-7 months after the games, and an injury like that can have a huge variability in terms of recovery time, rehab time, etc. And obviously, for the sport of CrossFit, it's not just that you need to get functionality back in your arm, but you need to be able to support and move heavy weights at fast reps. Um, but so far this season, everything's been on track. Every report coming out of the proven camp has looked positive and good and to be moving in the right direction. And I mean, everyone knows what Brooke Wells is capable of when she's healthy, and her career trajectory was looking, extremely impressive leading into last year and even throughout the games till she got hurt. Seems like everything's fine, and I don't have any reason at this point to doubt her ability to perform. In this field. There's not a ton of athletes with a lot of competition experience relative to her, and especially performing at that level. So I think she's, will she finish second in the top two? Is to be determined, but I think that she'll be able to execute and perform everything that's necessary to qualify for the games in this competition.
And speaking of top two, both of you guys have Danielle Brandon as your number one pick. She's somebody that we've been keeping an eye on for a couple years now. She's been doing great in Vegas with the Underdogs crew under Justin Kotler. PC, why do you have her as your number one seed?
Just we did a episode when we talked about the most, I guess, athletic CrossFitter, and
Mm.
just that's one of the reasons why. There's things that she does in the gym that other athletes are either incapable of doing, or she just does flat out better. And then looking at the programming at Mac, it highly favors her. Even something like the complex, the barbell complex, where I think she'll still finish in the top 8 in that field. But rope, legless rope climbs, I expect a sprint in that one. And she just right now, I mean, there's probably no one more well prepared than her right now after some of the reports we're getting from that underdogs crew, talking to Justin Kotler, talking to some of her training partners. She's so focused, especially after last year. She had a little bit of a disappointment. Yes, she had a top 15 finish, but she was really disappointed because one, her teammates were unable to compete, and also she was dealing with the possibility of having COVID, so she was kind of isolated from a lot of athletes. So this year, they said mentally and physically, it's the best she's ever been since she's been in the underdogs crew. So I'm expecting a really good performance.
Brian, talk to us about your 3 through 5 picks and how they made it into that top games ticket potential.
Yeah, I mean, this field for me, you obviously have Danielle and Brooke, and then the next two athletes that jump off the page to me are Sydney Mikulishin and Bailey Rail, both of whom were at the games last year. Bailey making the top 20, and Sydney, finishing in the mid 20s and getting cut in the final cut there. And I think that both athletes have had extremely productive and efficient off seasons. They've moved, well, Bailey's continued to train in Mayhem, but getting a full another year of exposure in that kind of an environment I think is only going to make her better. I'm not sure that her or anyone else was expecting her to do that well this year, but this time around, I think there's a certain level of belief that she has that will elevate the performance we see from her in Knoxville. And then Sydney Mikulishin moved to Boston, where she's training with Ben Bergeron and the Comp Train crew. They obviously identified her as a young talent up there, kind of in the middle of nowhere in Canada. And so bringing her into a location where she has the opportunity to get, a more experienced level of coaching, a more competitive training environment. I think she has an incredible drive to compete, to train, to excel in this sport, and I think that they can harness that really well at the CompTrain facility. And then lastly, Kelly Clark. She's one of the older athletes in this field and really in the semifinals in general for North America, but she's had a pretty diverse competition experience history, and I think that this field is the best opportunity that she's had to earn a spot to the games. I think she'll probably know that. She's done a lot of testing of games workouts in the past because she lives out there in California, and she will understand that this is probably the last opportunity she has to make the games as an individual, and I think that she'll be ready to go when game time comes around.
It's interesting because Brian and Tommy's picks are exactly the same. PC, something different from yours was that last final spot, number 5. You had Faith Ferguson. Why did you put her in your top picks?
Faith Ferguson, she's just had a great season so far to start off the year. I mean, she had a top 30 finish in the Open, and then she had another top 30 finish in the quarterfinal. She's 21 years old. She's out of that Maven camp that's known for producing, these prodigies out of the teen division. She competed in 2018 as a teenager, finished 6th, and she had a pretty decent, pretty decent performance at Wodapalooza as well. And she's just one of those up and coming young athletes, which that field is just full of them. A lot of, I wrote about that vaunted, that heralded class of 2017 teenagers, and she just missed it. But there's 5 of those teenagers or alumni from that division in here. But Faith Ferguson, who came in afterwards, she's someone that she's training in the right way. It was really hard to see, keep someone like Kelly Clark off my list because of her experience and her, just everything that Brian said. But I really expect someone like Faith to kind of break through in this competition.
When it comes to the cut lines, that's really where the stories start to play a part. Brian, you had for your wild card, though, you had Shelby Neal, PC, you had Lindsay Porter. How do you guys decide who gets that wild card and just misses the cut line? Brian, we'll start with you.
It's we've mentioned it before. Like, the wild card doesn't necessarily mean the 6th spot. The wild card is more of an athlete who I think has like a really good chance to finish somewhere in the top 10, but more so she's not, or he's not, that well known of an athlete that people may or may not be thinking about as potentially flirting with making the last spot at the games or something like that. Shelby Neal is a pretty young athlete, very diverse skill set. She competed last year at the Crash Crucible event that Taylor Self won prior to Wodapalooza, and she also competed at Wodapalooza. She won that Crash event, so she's got a little bit of extra competition experience in the past offseason against a decent field of athletes when you're talking about people who can be in that 6 to 15 range at a semifinal in North America for women. So I think she's feeling good about herself this season based on that performance, based on being able to compete in Wodapalooza, and I expect her to do fairly well and maybe one of those athletes that'll catch some people's eyes at the MAC.
PC, what about you and your wild card pick?
Yeah, I picked Lindsay Porter. I mentioned that 2017 alumni class. She's a part of that, and I just like her skill set. I got to see her in person live at Wodapalooza, and I was really impressed. I mean, I remember her as a teenager at the 2017 games, but she looks like a totally different athlete than she was back then. And at Wodapalooza, she did really well. She was competing in that RX division, which Brian could talk about this in terms of the RX division. He's actually written, Sydney Michelson is an alumni of that RX division at Wodapalooza, and I think she had a top 5 finish at Wodapalooza in the RX division. And they were short a couple events that I think she would have done really well in. But then the individual quarterfinals, she finished 29th in North America, which is really impressive for someone who's only 22 years old and not widely known. I mean, last year she was 80th in the quarterfinals. So, it's a lot of improvement, and she's trending in the right way. She has some semifinals experience. She competed at West Coast Classic last year, had a top 20 finish there. So, she's already making the jump from last year to this year. So I expect another big jump this year.
Any noteworthy athletes that either of you left off before we jump to the men's side?
Yeah, probably 2, and I think Patrick would probably agree with me about Rebecca Fuselier. She's another just up-and-coming athlete in the sport. But on the flip side, there's Haley Murillo's in this field, who's a little bit more seasoned and experienced athlete. And I think that similarly to Kelly Clark, she'll look at this this draw for semifinal athletes in this season as one of her best opportunities to ever make the games. So Haley's one of those up and down athletes that'll have a couple really good events and historically a couple not as great events, but I think she'll have a more consistent performance here. And if you're looking for a kind of a veteran athlete in a field of a lot of young athletes, like Patrick's been saying, that Haley Murillo could be a sneaky, 5 through 8 and possibly have a last chance qualifier chance type athlete.
Yeah, I agree with Brian. Those are two athletes Haley's a vet around for a while, but there's two others, if I want to pick two other ones that were different, where be Leah Irons. She's kind of in that same mold as Haley Murillo. Well, she's not a stunt woman like Haley Murillo, or quite as talented as Kelly Clark. And then another one, and I think Brian would probably have some good things to say about her as well, is Emma Gardner out of the ComTrain camp. She's 19 years old. She's training with Sydney. She's training with Amanda Barnhart. And she made a huge jump last year, and you can tell in her confidence level. She won the pit team throwdown last year. She's hungry, and she's very talented, and we'll see what happens.
All right, let's move on to the men's side now. Brian has Noah Alston in his first pick. Tommy has him as the second pick. PC brought him down to the third pick. Brian, we'll start with you though. Why do you have the confidence in Noah Alston to take the top of the podium?
Yeah, I mean that's I kind of feel like I owe it to him, which is not necessarily the answer you want to give, but he has impressed me this year. He made some kind of weird changes in the offseason in terms of losing a bunch of weight, putting a little bit of weight back on.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just constantly asking myself these questions about athletes like him of how long does he want to put in the effort to remain relevant in the sport at the level that he's used to and that people expect him to do so. And based on what he's done since Wodapalooza in the Open and the quarterfinals and the way he's approaching training, it feels like he's finding fun and even new ways for a guy who's historically known of finding fun in training. So I think he's just living in the moment in terms of enjoying the last 1 or 2 years of his career. I know he wants to get to 10 years. And, he loves this kind of stage. The regionals has always been a place where he's thrived and done extremely well. There are definitely other athletes that could win this competition, but I just have this feeling that this is going to be a really good year for Noah, and he's on a good track. And I think that that's going to start with a win at the semifinals.
PC, do you not feel like you owe it to Noah Alston to put him in the
Wow.
first or second position?
Wow, no, geez, I
just threw PC under the bus and I went forward and backward.
You did. That was bad. Oh, my apologies, Noah. Can I rescind my picks here? No.
I feel like every year you have to apologize to an athlete. I think last year you had to apologize to Justin Medeiros.
Oh, you have to bring that up, huh? You had to bring that one up.
We'll pull up your top 5 now while you defend
exactly. No, I totally agree with this. I really like the pick with Noah Alston. It's a good pick, but I'm not saying just because he finishes third that it's going to be a blowout. It's going to be really close. I really think all three, Saxon, Cole, and Noah, these are all three people, and you can throw in Dallin in there. I think it's going to be a close race between all 4 of those. And I kind of picked Saxon, just based off his body of work this season. He's doing unbelievable. I mean, he won the Open. He had a strong semifinal, and Cole's a gamer. Cole beat Noah last year in the West Coast Classic, and that was a semifinal that had repeat workouts that all of them had done. So I mean, I guess in some way Cole Sager improved from his previous version. And I do agree with Noah in terms of what Brian said in terms of Noah just being a different Noah this year. He seems more in tune, more happy, and but I don't know how that translates onto the competition floor. But I do know Cole Sager is one of those people. You put him out there. He's a former football player. He's trying to run through people. So if Noah's in his way, he's going to run through him. In some way or the other. And yeah. Thanks for that. Appreciate that.
We're here for you.
Yeah.
I want to take a moment to talk about Dallin Pepper. all three of you guys, obviously including Tommy, put him in the top 5. He's been talked about so much leading up to this season as a former teen games athlete. But why do you both think that this is the year that he finally punches his ticket to the games as an individual? Brian, we'll start with you.
Yeah, I mean, he's admitted it. Everyone knows it. Who's pays attention to his career? That last year at the West Coast Classic, he blew it on that D-ball workout, and he basically chalks it up to just lack of experience with the D-ball. He has all the tools. He has all the skill sets. He's strong enough. He's fit enough. He's fast enough, and he moves well enough. I don't think that there's any chance that he makes those kind of mistakes this year. I think he's proven at Wodapalooza that he's able to perform under the lights, under the pressure, against a really high-level field, finishing 5th there. I think he's, kind of the exception in terms of the men coming out of that teenage division that we've seen so far in the sport, where he's ready to make the step into the limelight of the CrossFit Games. And I think this is the first of many times that we'll see him do that.
Yeah, Brian, those are all the reasons I would choose him as well, and I have him finishing 4th. But the only reason why I don't have him higher is just because of a lack of experience, and and that's what cost him ultimately last year, was a lack of experience, like Brian said. But he has all the tools, and he's a bigger athlete too, that moves like a smaller athlete, which is very rare to find. I mean, I think Jason Hopper's a pretty, he does that. He a little bit sometimes, where he competes like he's smaller than he actually is, especially when it comes to gymnastics. And I think also Dallin, him going to a camp, training with Phil Toon down there, and training with James Sprague under Matt Torres, I think that's only going to make him better. I think it's going to make that whole crew down there that was training Emma Carey as well. So again, like I said before, I think it's going to be a close race between those 4. I could see a point spread between 1 and 4 being less than 30 points, total. So, it's going to be fun to watch. And I will tell you, if he does punch his ticket to Madison, you're going to see one heck of a celebration from that kid.
That's something that I personally would look forward to seeing.
Yeah.
Brian, Logan Collins, man, we didn't even know if he was going to make it to a semifinal for, it seems like maybe a couple of weeks, with, everything that was going on with the mix-up and trying to get him into a semifinal that he could actually get to. Why do you think that he can get his games ticket at this semifinal?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you're pretty much anyone in the men's field at the MAC, having the late addition of Logan Collins to this field is not something that you want to see. Logan, through the years of 2016 through 18, was kind of a force to be reckoned with in the South Regional, making the games 3 consecutive years and backing those performances up with top 15 finishes at the CrossFit Games. 3 consecutive finishes between 15 and 11th is a level of consistency. It's not the upper echelon of the sport, but it's a guy who's able to do a huge variety of workouts in live competition very, very well over a period of time. And we haven't gotten to see him do that because last year he was sent to the Atlas Games Online, where he finished 10th, and it's just not as favorable as a format for him. I don't know for sure that he'll make the games, but I do know that he's a threat to make the games, and if I was in that field, I would be, keeping my eye on Logan.
Something interesting that I'm noticing about all 3 of your picks is nobody has put Spencer Panchik in their top 5. Now,
I was about to say, is there a Spencer? Is there a 4th brother? Is there a Spencer Panchik? Why haven't we interviewed that guy yet? Or did he retire too? I don't know.
He's the 4th brother,
Gotcha.
But Patrick, you did put him as your wild card, but as we said, wild card doesn't necessarily mean the 6th place. I want to just talk about him for a moment with both of you. PC, did you put him there because it was like a hopeful, like we want to see him back at the games, or do you really think that he could be in contention to make it back this year?
Oh, I think he's definitely in contention. I mean, that field itself, we talked about those 4 athletes, and I'm really high on Tyler Christoffel as well, just because of I think he's due. But Spencer's one of those guys who's right in there, and we'll probably talk about it later. But there's a number of guys we left off the list. I left Logan off my top 7, but Spencer's definitely someone who, again, at West Coast Classic, he was right on the fringe. He competed last chance qualifier. I feel like he's due, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's there.
Brian, you don't think that Spencer's going to be in the top 5?
Yeah. Get him, Lauren, get him.
I would say that
Really tough questions.
the trio of Logan Collins, Tyler Christoffel, and Spencer Panchik are almost interchangeably here in the 5, 6, 7 spots when I look at this semifinal field of men. And it's it's one of these things, like, everyone loves the Panchik brothers. They're extremely likable. They have a great backstory, and Spencer's the one that everyone's rooting for. They want to see him make it because we've seen the success with Scott, we've seen the success with Saxon, and Spencer. Every one of them would tell you he's just as good as those guys. Like, he throws down with them in training, and he beats them here. They beat him there. It's always a margin of seconds. He beat them both at Wadapalooza, which was a huge boost of confidence for him. And I thought that Spencer, coming into the season, would have a great chance to make the CrossFit Games. This is just a tough draw. All 7 of those guys at the CrossFit Games would do very, very well, and I think, with the exception of Logan Collins, that whichever one of them ends up in the last chance qualifier will have a chance to make it into one of those 2 spots. I basically think this is a tough draw for Spencer in a year that he was primed and poised to make the games. He might still do it, but it's going to be tough.
And I want to make a correction here. Tommy Marquez did put him as the 5th on his top 5.
There
So
you
he
go.
squeezed him in there.
There you go. There you go. There you go, Spencer.
There you go. Tommy
go.
has the faith.
Did Tommy have his wild card Spencer, or was Spencer his wild card?
No, Spencer is in
gotcha.
5th. Tyler Christoffel was his wild card.
Hmm.
All right, let's talk about some of those athletes right on the cut line that you guys didn't put in the top 5 but could squeeze in. PC, let's start with you this time.
There's 2 names that stick out: John Colte and Jake Berman. Colte, he trains with that Proven camp. He's a semifinals from last year. I mean, when you train with those people at Proven in East Nashville, he lives there, so he's training with Saxon, along Tia, with Brooke and stuff. You can't help but not get better. And this will be his 2nd year in that Proven camp, so I can see a huge jump. He can push for a last chance qualifier, if not push for that 5th spot. And then someone like Jake Berman, who's relatively young, Brian has some familiarity with him as well. He's out of that training think tank, and it's someone that Noah's really high on. And he's had a very good open, a very good semi quarterfinal as well. So those are the 2 names I'm looking at that could push for those, if not a last chance qualifier spot, they can even push for that 5th or 4th spot.
Brian, who are some of the names that you left off right on the cut line?
I would go with Zach Watts and Mitchell Stevenson, both of whom have proven that they can qualify in a live semifinal or regional format before. Mitchell Stevenson did it in 2018 in a very difficult West Regional that saw guys like Christian Lucero and Garrett Fisher and George Sanchez miss the cut to a guy like Mitchell Stevenson. He was competing with his team, I Love It, last year, and they placed 10th at the CrossFit Games. He forwent the opportunity to compete with them this year in semifinals to do an individual competition, which makes me believe that he thinks he can be competitive in that field. And then Zach Watts was, almost more of a surprise than Jason Hopper last year at the MAC. Like, no one was looking at this guy as a chance to make the games. He didn't do very well at the games, but he did do exceptionally well at semifinals, and that's what we're talking about. So those are 2 guys who I would say have an outside chance to maybe surprise some people when the MAC rolls around.
Yeah, I really like Zach. That Zach Watts pick is, you said he's strong. He won that snatch event last year. Not a lot of people remember that, and here he is. He's back at the MAC where he kind of made his name last year. So I would like to see it. It'd be a good story for him, because I think a lot of people are kind of thinking that might have been a fluke last year.
We're excited to see what happens. We're on to week 2 of semifinals. Brian, Friend, Patrick, Clark, thank you guys for joining us, and we'll see you next time.